Right now, we're going to bring in Jonathan Ruhe, who serves as the Director of Foreign Policy for the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. Jonathan, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tomorrow, marking 1 year since the October 7th attack on Israel, and the region has been locked in war ever since. Are you surprised we're a year out? There's still so much fierce fighting.
I think a lot of this was unforeseeable in the sense that October 6th, a year ago, looked a lot different than the October 6th of this year. A couple of things that I think are very important to note. One is this increasingly direct conflict between Israel and Iran certainly seems like it's been a long time coming in one form or another. I think a surprise about what's going on in Lebanon is that so far the IDF has actually been fairly effective at removing a lot of the core commanders and capabilities of Hezbollah, which is far and away Iran's most potent threat to Israel in the region. And I would just add also that as we're seeing today, a year on, the war in Gaza is still indeed going on. And I think there's certain questions about how that ends, and that should not be lost in the rest of the conflagrations we're seeing around the region.
Yeah, you're right. There are still about 100 hostages who haven't come home. I spoke to Aviva Siegel. Robert Sherman just showed a portion of that interview. She's a former hostage herself, and I talked to her a little bit more about how hard it is knowing her husband, Keith, who's an American citizen, is still in Hamas's terrorist captivity. Let's listen to a bit more of that.
When the Hamas terrorists started shooting our house and walking inside and opening the door in such an easy way, I didn't even feel my body. I was in a complete and utterly hysteria. Keith, what saved us, put his head on his knees and his hands on his head, and they didn't kill us because of that, because my whole neighborhood is all killed or kidnapped.
And while in captivity, she was telling me they were basically being starved, and the terrorists would eat in front of them, and they would touch the girls around them and just do anything they could to make their lives miserable there. Jonathan, what's it going to take to bring them home safely?
Well, I think that certainly is $1 million question. A ceasefire would certainly be one way to do that, but I think there's been a hard time here, at least among the Biden administration, to admit that it requires Hamas to take yes for an answer, and they have proven categorically unwilling to do that, and I see no change in that. In fact, I think they're digging in their heels and hoping that this larger war with Iran and its other proxies will pull Hamas's chestnuts out of the fire, even today, as they appear to be on their last limbs militarily and politically. I think the other option is for Israel to keep going. As I mentioned, IDF operations in Gaza have drawn down, but they are nowhere near complete. And one of the things that the IDF has been very frank about is that those operations at some level will be going on for months or even more still here a year out after October 7th. And part of those operations would include potentially trying to find however many hostages remain, whether dead or alive.
I mean, with the three-front war, you just wonder how many weapons could still be left in the warehouse there. And French Prime Minister Macron is saying that countries should stop shipping weapons to Israel in order to bring about a ceasefire, prompting a furious response from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's listen.
Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support, but their shame will continue long after the war is won.
So what do you think of President Macron's suggestion?
I think it's needless virtue signaling. It's not the first time that a leader of France has tried to stake out an independent path apart from the United States and the rest of the other partners. It's certainly unfortunate and sends the wrong message to Iran and Hezbollah that if they just hold out, they can hope for Israel and its ability to conduct operations, ultimately to be limited by political and diplomatic pressure, like we're seeing from President Macron, and as we've seen in the past and in smaller levels from the United States and some of our other European allies. I think certainly, as Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned, the question of Israel's ability to maintain munition stocks to fight what's increasingly a multi-front war is certainly at the forefront of a lot of discussions between the U.S. and Israel that are ongoing right now. And I think, most importantly, even the amazing successes that Israel has had against Hezbollah in the past few weeks should not obscure the fact that continued resupply of Israel for vital arms and munitions, everything from high-end air defense interceptors right down to spare bullets, and a lot of more prosaic elements, that'll still need to be ongoing for a long time.
Jonathan Ruhe, thank you so much. You serve as the Director of Foreign Policy for the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again for having me.